It is late September of 2019, and it's about time that I started to dig sweet potatoes. The large block in front of me are flowering, and I am trying to let these things go to seed. So I don't want to dig these just yet, as I want the seeds to mature, but I think that we are only a few days or weeks out from that. However, because of the nighttime temperatures dropping down into the 40s currently, and we've gone into a very dry stretch here, as you can see by the wilted sweet potatoes. It hasn't rained in about 3 weeks, and the days are in the 80s or 90s. And the humidity's been pretty low. They're not going to size up to any appreciable extent. Plus, there's the fact that in order to cure them properly, I do need some warm weather to do the curing. So, with that in mind, everything that I'm not interested in getting seeds from, I am going to dig up, and then we'll just record that and discuss the yields and so forth. All the sweet potatoes this year, with the exception of the dark-leaved ones, which are ornamental types, all of the typical edible green leaf varieties I sourced from Sandhill Preservation, and I've gotten sweet potatoes from them in the past, and I'd highly recommend them if you want a really broad selection of unusual varieties. And they have actually gotten a lot better in the last few years at shipping out very high quality slips. So I would strongly recommend them. Nobody else that I know of has the kind of selection of varieties that they have. So do your best to support them, or else start growing some from true sweet potato seeds so we can get some more diversity out there. So let's get digging. The first variety I'm going to dig is Fraser White. It's supposed to be a good variety. I have no experience with it, but only one plant survived. They didn't root very well. I have a suspicion that it's just in a bad spot, but I did take some cuttings of these things to root, and we'll see if I can try again next year and we'll do better. But I want to dig this one plant and we'll see what we end up with. This is the total yield of the Fraser White. I don't actually think this is a bad variety. I think that I put it in a bad spot and it had a bad year. I have taken cuttings of these and I am sure they will root. So I will try again next year in a different spot and we'll see what happens then. These I am just going to feed to my goats and not even going to bother with trying to keep these or eat these. They're tiny. So we'll move on to the next variety. The next variety is Amish Bush Porto Rico, and it has a moderately compact habit. I've seen somewhat more compact varieties, but it's fairly compact. It has a cut leaf. There are varieties that are more cut than this, as we'll see in a moment. But this is a sort of a average cut leaf type, sort of a darker leaf. And I have grown the standard Bush Porto Rico in the past, and this variety seems somewhat different than that. So we'll dig it up and we'll see what it turns out to be. The first of the Bush Porto Rico, this one here, actually yielded really nicely. They were in a nice tight clump right under the plant, nice size roots. And it went downhill from there. But to be fair, I planted 6 or 8 slips, and a lot of them it was so dry, and the spot they were in was rather poor, and they were in intense competition with corn and beans, and they didn't do well. The 3 here had the best soil, the most water, and the least competition, and they did reasonably well. So I think this is a pretty decent variety. They taste good. It's definitely a variety worth looking at. Now we're going to move on to the next one. This variety is Goldstar, and I would say that it's moderately vining. It's a little more aggressive of a plant than the Bush Porto Rico. It's less aggressive than my other vining ones this year, which are Hong and Resisto. And you can see it has a highly incised or highly cut leaf. Do an example here. So this is Proven Winner Sweet Potato Illusion Garnet Lace. This is about as cut as you can get. Now this one is not that cut, but it's more cut than what the Bush Porto Rico was. I don't have great hopes for these because the entire season they have been competing with corn, and earlier there's a lot of shade and now it's really dry. So if these things actually produce any meaningful yield, this would be a fantastic variety because of the really ridiculous spot I put them in. I didn't have enough room and I just rammed them in wherever I had space, and it was a poor growing environment. Well, let's see what we get. This is the yield from the Goldstar, and I have to say I'm very impressed with this variety. Although in the great scheme of things, it is not a great yield. The yield is much better than the Bush Porto Rico, and these plants were absolutely in worse conditions, much worse conditions, with much worse soil, much more competition with other plants, much less sunlight, much less water. I had the same number of plants planted and I got probably a little bit better yield on the average, but all the plants were in worse conditions. And I'm totally convinced if I put these plants in really good conditions that this would be a fantastic variety, but also a variety that if you had a bad year with a lot of drought, or you had to cram it in somewhere where you didn't have a lot of space, which is what I ended up doing, you'll still get a half decent harvest. Never grown this one before, and right now I'm pretty impressed. Most of the sweet potatoes are a reasonable size, reasonable shape, not too huge. The huge ones really are kind of god-awful and worthless. I mean, this is actually a pretty good, could be a little bigger, like this one is probably about perfect for me, but nice variety. Very pleased with that. Goldstar. And that's all I'm going to dig up today. And once I get seed pods harvested off my other varieties, I'll dig them up and we'll see what we get. I think we'll get a lot better yield on those because they were put in the best soil and no competition, and I've actually watered them a fair bit. But those are the varieties that I wanted to get seeds off of, so I was trying to take better care of them